On a rainy Boston night, she hears the donor's voice and standing right in front of her. The umbrella slips from her hand. The streetlight flickers. Three men in black step out of an SUV, and then he appears. Tall, soaked in rain, pale blue eyes cutting through the dark. She knows that voice. It's the same voice from the clinic recording, the one that once sounded safe, anonymous, distant. But now it belongs to a man who looks at her swollen belly and calmly tells her the truth. She's carrying something that belongs to him. In that instant, her quiet dream dies on the sidewalk.
The narrative originates with the foundational human desire to have a child, to construct a life of normalcy. Within a sterile sanctuary of medical science, a future is selected from a tablet, a transaction meant to be as safe as it was discreet. However, the genetic material she procured did not originate from some anonymous student. It belonged to the most formidable figure on the East Coast, an architect of absolute finality. The moment the criminal world discovered she carried the heir to a violent dynasty, the quiet architecture of her life was slated for demolition. She had purchased a dream, but had, in fact, instigated a war with its epicenter at the Lane Institute of Family Planning in a glittering Boston skyscraper. The establishment was so exclusive it forewent all advertisement. An audience was granted only through connections. For Scarlett Hayes, a 32-year-old architectural preservationist, gaining entry took 6 months and a substantial portion of her savings. Now, seated in the reception area, she betrayed her anxiety by twisting a ring on her finger. The air was a curious fusion of expensive botanicals and clinical sterility designed to placate the 1%. Scarlett was not among them. She was a woman whose biological imperative was no longer ticking, but sounding a desperate alarm. After 2 failed engagements and a harsh medical verdict, Scarlett was about to make the most sovereign decision of her life. She was resolved to become a mother entirely on her own terms. A nurse in immaculate white scrubs ushered her into Dr. Alistair Lane's lavish office. He was a man with silver hair, a politician's practiced charm, and the eyes of a predator. He indicated a chair before his immense desk. "Scarlett, excellent. We are ready to finalize," Dr. Lane said, tapping his tablet. "Your blood work is optimal. Hormones are perfectly aligned for the procedure. We simply need to confirm your selection." He passed the device to her. On its screen was a confidential donor file, Profile 409 of Italian-American heritage, 6 feet 3 inches tall. Occupation listed as a private equity entrepreneur. Health, exceptional, with no genetic liabilities and a high intelligence quotient. Critically, however, there were no photographs. The Lane Institute prohibited them to ensure the anonymity of its elite clientele. In lieu of an image, there was a brief audio sample of a deep, gravelly voice reading a generic poem, followed by a list of his traits. Dark hair, piercing pale blue eyes, athletic build. "He's perfect," Scarlett whispered, as if in a trance. The profile felt almost too ideal. She inquired if he had waived all parental claims, needing assurance that her child's future was secure from interference. Dr. Lane offered a well-rehearsed, comforting smile. "Profile 409 is one of our most secure files. The donor provided this sample years ago before a hazardous medical procedure. He possesses 0 interest in children. He is bound by an ironclad non-disclosure agreement. He is a ghost, Scarlett. He is simply the genetic blueprint for your dream," the doctor stated. She exhaled a breath she felt she had been holding for an eternity. "Then let's do it. Let's make a baby." 2 weeks later, the procedure was done. 4 weeks after that, Scarlett sat on the edge of her bathtub, staring at a plastic indicator. 2 bold pink lines stared back. She covered her mouth, tears of pure, overwhelming joy tracing paths down her cheeks. She was pregnant. The following 4 months became a blissful montage of prenatal vitamins, ultrasounds, and painting the nursery in her Cambridge townhouse a soft, buttery yellow. She felt the first faint kicks at 18 weeks. A boy, her son. She had never experienced happiness this profound. She existed within a perfect bubble of contentment. She was unaware, of course, that this bubble was about to be shattered by a bullet. You see, Gabriel Rossi didn't traffic in ghosts. He created them. 30 miles from Scarlett's peaceful home, in the vast, shadowed basement of a shipping warehouse, the air was dense with the aroma of blood and terror. Gabriel, head of the Rossi Syndicate, flicked a minuscule speck of blood from his custom Tom Ford suit. He was 34, possessed a terrifyingly placid demeanor, and ruled the city's entire criminal underworld with absolute control. In front of him, secured to a chair, was a brutalized, terrified accountant. "I will ask you one final time, Ree," Gabriel said, his voice a low, resonant hum. "Where did my funds go?" The $3 million that was meant to be laundered through the clinics had simply ceased to exist. "Lane," the accountant sobbed, expelling blood. "Dr. Lane, he had severe gambling debts. The Irish syndicate was pressuring him. He diverted the money, Mr. Rossi. He bled the accounts dry to pay them." Gabriel's pale blue eyes narrowed. "Dr. Alistair Lane." Gabriel had invested capital into the Lane Institute, utilizing it as an elegant front for his enterprises. But his connection to the clinic was also profoundly more personal. 5 years ago, before surviving an attack that nearly left him paralyzed, Gabriel had stored genetic material there. It was a contingency plan devised by his father to guarantee the Rossi bloodline would persist if the surgery proved fatal. The operation was a success. Gabriel had completely forgotten about the vault's existence. "Silas," Gabriel murmured to his underboss, a hulking man in the shadows. "Deal with Ree, then have the cars prepared. We are paying Dr. Lane a visit." An hour later, the sleek glass doors of the Lane Institute were shattered. It was after midnight. The clinic was dark, but Gabriel and 3 of his men neutralized the alarms with brutal swiftness. They found Dr. Lane in his office, frantically stuffing wads of cash into a duffel bag. Lane froze completely when the doors clicked shut behind Gabriel, who held a silenced Beretta as if it were an extension of his own hand. "Departing Alistair?" Gabriel inquired mildly. "Gabriel, Mr. Rossi, I can clarify about the money. It's a temporary complication. I was going to replace every cent." Gabriel simply held up a hand, silencing him. "I am not concerned about the money, Alistair. $3 million is a rounding error for me. What I value is loyalty. You have betrayed my trust." He nodded to Silas, who slammed Lane's face down onto the mahogany desk. Silas brought up the clinic's encrypted database on the computer. "Examine the inventory," Gabriel ordered. "I want to know precisely what this parasite has been selling." Silas's fingers flew across the keyboard, breaking the encryption in moments. Lists of names and biological assets populated the screen. And then Silas stopped cold. His entire body went rigid. "Boss," Silas said, his voice unusually taut, "you need to see this." Gabriel stepped behind the desk. The screen was the log for Vault 7, Gabriel's personal restricted vault. Asset profile 409. Status: withdrawn. Date of transfer 5 months ago. Recipient: Scarlett Hayes, a complete civilian, no syndicate affiliation whatsoever. The silence that filled the room was so dense it was suffocating. Gabriel stared at the screen, his blue eyes turning as dark as a storm front. The realization struck him like a physical blow. His blood, the Rossi heir, had been stolen, sold, and was now developing inside a total stranger. Gabriel's hand shot out, his fingers closing around Dr. Lane's throat with frightening speed. He dragged the doctor from the desk. "What did you do?" Gabriel hissed, his composed exterior cracking to reveal the monster within. I needed the money," Lane choked, his face turning a deep shade of purple. "She was desperate. She paid $500,000 under the table for premium genetics. I altered the records. I swear she is ignorant of who you are. She believes you're a private equity broker." "You sold my child," Gabriel stated, the words like poison on his tongue. If his rivals, the Corsetti family, were to learn of this, they would not hesitate. They would locate this woman. They would butcher her and his unborn son simply to destroy his legacy. Gabriel released Lane, who crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. Without looking down, Gabriel raised the Beretta and depressed the trigger twice. The muffled reports of the silencer instantly terminated the doctor's life. "Destroy the servers, burn the entire building to the ground," Gabriel commanded Silas, his voice completely devoid of emotion. "And bring me every piece of information that exists on Scarlett Hayes, where she is employed, where she resides, the very air she breathes. I want her found by morning." The storm finally broke over Boston just as Scarlett locked her front door. The rain assailed the streets, driven by a ferocious wind. She was exactly 22 weeks pregnant. She placed a hand over the gentle curve of her stomach, feeling a small, reassuring kick. "I know, little one," she whispered, smiling into the gloom. "Mommy is getting the ice cream now, I promise." Scarlett unfurled her umbrella, stepping out for a brief trip to a local market. The streetlights, however, were malfunctioning, casting the street in a sinister, cinematic light. Her neighborhood, usually alive with academics and professionals, was completely deserted. As she turned onto Elm Street, a blacked-out sport utility vehicle was parked, its engine a low growl audible under the storm. A sudden, visceral chill passed through Scarlett, one that had nothing to do with the cold. Her dormant survival instincts, long obsolete in her secure world, suddenly flared to life. She increased her pace. It was a fatal miscalculation. The SUV's doors opened in unison. 3 men in suits stepped into the deluge, completely obstructing her path. Scarlett came to a jarring halt, her heart pounding violently in her chest. She clutched her umbrella, taking a hesitant step back. "Excuse me," she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to control it. "You are blocking the sidewalk." The men did not react. Then, the rear door of the vehicle swung open, and the architect of the scene emerged. Even amid the tempest, this man commanded his surroundings. He was a formidable presence, broad-shouldered in a dark overcoat that shielded a tailored suit. He moved beneath a sputtering streetlight, and Scarlett saw his face. A sharp jaw, dark hair flattened by rain, and eyes that were a shocking, piercing pale blue. The description from the clinic's audio file detonated in her consciousness, an utter impossibility. The donor was supposed to be a ghost. She believed he was a phantom, a ghost in the machine of her meticulously planned life. Scarlett Hayes. The voice in tones, a baritone resonating with the texture of gravel and old whiskey. It is, unmistakably, the voice from the audio file, the same one that painted verses about the ocean in her mind. But the warmth has been bled out, supplanted by a chilling, quiet authority. "Who are you?" she counters, her arms instinctively creating a shield around her abdomen as she averts her gaze. "How do you know my name?" Gabriel closes the distance. His eyes conduct a swift, predatory inventory, the rain-soaked coat, the stark terror in her expression before fixing on the undeniable swell of her stomach. His child. A ferocious, primal wave of possession surges through him. "My name is Gabriel Rossi," he declares, halting a precise 2 feet from her. The rain seems to recoil from this man's presence. "And you," he continues, "are in possession of something that belongs to me." The air lodges in Scarlett's throat. Rossi. The name detonates in her consciousness like a thunderclap. In Boston, that name is a foundation of power, holding dominion over the docks, the unions, the city's political heart. They were the very definition of the mob. "No," she whispers, a sound of pure denial as she retreats. Her umbrella slips from her grasp, clattering against the slick pavement. "No! You're mistaken. I used a clinic. A legal, anonymous donor was paid for. My file stated—" "Your file was a fiction," Gabriel interrupts, his tone lethally smooth. "Dr. Lane used you to settle his gambling debts with stolen property. He sold you my lineage. The architect of your fantasy was a common thief, and tonight he reconciled that debt with his life." The implication of his words strikes her with the force of a physical blow paid with his life. A raw, unreasoning panic eclipses all other thought. Scarlett pivots and simply runs, a desperate flight into the storm. The treacherous ground is irrelevant. Escape is the only imperative. She covers barely 5 yards. In a fluid motion, powerful arms encircle her waist, deliberately avoiding her belly, lifting her from the pavement as if she weighed nothing. A scream tears from her as she fights like a cornered animal, her fists connecting with unyielding muscle. "Let me go! Help!" she cries out, her legs kicking wildly. Gabriel secures her arms with a grip like forged steel, yet he remains exquisitely careful not to apply any pressure to her unborn child. "Cease your struggle, Scarlett. If my intention was to harm you, you would already be dead." He conveys her to the SUV, depositing her into the deep leather of the back seat. He follows, and the solid thud of the door seals them in, abruptly muting the tempest outside and silencing her cries. From the driver's seat, a man named Silas engages the locks and accelerates, the vehicle pulling away from the curb with brutal efficiency. Scarlett scrambles to the furthest corner, her breath coming in ragged gasps, rainwater and tears mingling on her face. "What are you going to do to us?" she sobs, her hands clutching her stomach. "Please, I had no idea. You can have the money. I'll go away. I'll sign any document you require. Just allow me to keep my baby." Gabriel unfastens his damp overcoat, his expression a mask of inscrutability as he observes her disintegration. She was an outsider, a civilian thrust into a world whose rules she could not comprehend. "You fail to grasp the reality you've just been pulled into," Gabriel says, his voice dangerously tranquil. "In my world, blood serves as currency. Blood is the source of power, and blood is invariably a target. The moment the Corsetti family learns that a Rossi heir exists inside an undefended architect, they will dispatch a team to cut that child from your body." A choked, despairing sound escapes Scarlett as she buries her face in her hands. This was a nightmare, a waking torment from which she could not stir. "You sought a donor, Miss Hayes," Gabriel proceeds, leaning closer. The air thickens with the scent of expensive cologne and rain. "Instead, you selected a king, and the heirs to my legacy are not raised in defenseless 2-bedroom apartments." "So what is your plan?" she retorted, her gaze a mixture of pure terror and defiance. To imprison me and seize my child upon its birth? My plan, Gabriel corrected, is to ensure your survival. As of this moment, you are a ghost. Your townhouse will be vacated. Your employer will be informed of your sudden relocation abroad. You are now an asset of the Rossi Syndicate. You have no right. This is kidnapping. This is preservation, Gabriel stated, his voice laced with ice as he turned his gaze to the rain-streaked city lights through the tinted window. Welcome to the family, Scarlet. The SUV sliced through the night, its destination the fortified entrance of the Rossi compound. Scarlet's hand rested on her belly, a tremor shaking her frame despite the vehicle's warmth. She had invested a fortune to secure a life of perfect peace. In its place, she had purchased a gilded cage, with the key held by the very monster who fathered her child. Scarlet awoke to the aroma of espresso and the profound, heavy silence of a space far too grand. She blinked against the morning light streaming through colossal windows. For a fleeting instant, her mind was a clean slate before the crushing weight of the previous night descended upon her. This was not her home. This was a suite of staggering proportions. A space torn from the pages of a magazine showcasing modern castles. The walls were paneled in dark, imposing walnut. The bed linens were of an impossible quality, and the door was secured from the exterior. Sitting up, Scarlet placed a protective hand on her stomach. We're all right, she whispered to the child, her voice betraying a slight tremble. We are still here. A silver tray on the nightstand held a steaming cup of decaf, a bowl of fresh fruit, and, with a chilling intimacy, her specific brand of prenatal vitamins. Beside it lay her favorite lotion taken directly from her own bathroom. The violation of her private world was total. They had dismantled and packed away her entire existence as she slept. The heavy oak door clicked, and Gabriel Rossi entered, attired in a flawless charcoal three-piece suit worn without a tie. He resembled less a street enforcer and more a merciless Wall Street executive, which, in essence, he was. Good morning, Gabriel said, the deep resonance of his voice permeating the room. He did not inquire about her rest. He simply moved to a seating area by the windows, settled into a leather armchair, and observed her, with his unnerving pale blue eyes. You can't hold me here, Scarlet said, drawing the covers to her chin, attempting a facade of confidence she was far from feeling. I have a career, I have a life, I have hospital appointments. My absence will be noted. Your firm received an email from your account at 6 this morning, Gabriel replied smoothly, crossing one leg over the other. You've accepted a lucrative last-minute commission to restore a historic chateau in the Swiss Alps. Your apartment lease is terminated and paid in full. Your possessions are in a secure storage facility under my name. Regarding your medical care, Dr. Harrison, one of the state's foremost obstetricians, is currently establishing a private clinic for you downstairs. You will lack for nothing. Scarlet could only stare, horrified by the clinical efficiency with which he had erased her. You have deleted my life in a single night. I have secured it, Gabriel corrected, his jaw tense. You perceive yourself as a hostage, Scarlet. You are mistaken. You are the mother of the Rossi heir. Out there, you are a mark. In here, behind steel gates and 50 armed men, you are a queen. I have no desire to be a queen, she countered, her eyes stinging with tears of pure frustration. I only wanted to be a mother. I purchased a vial of cells from a laboratory. I did not enlist in the mafia. Gabriel rose, covering the distance between them in 3 measured strides. He stood by the bed, a formidable presence looming over her. The scent of bergamot and latent danger emanated from him. "You did not purchase cells. You purchased my legacy," Gabriel said, his voice lowering to a menacing whisper. "And my legacy is not yours alone to possess. The Corsetti family has waged a war of annihilation against my own for 3 generations. Should Dominic Corsetti discover your existence, he will not be deterred by your innocence." Gabriel then articulates a chilling ultimatum. Corsetti would literally excise the infant from her womb as a statement. Her new reality is absolute. She will remain here. She will eat his food, see his physicians, and her sole function is to survive. The gravity of his words finally shatters her disbelief. She looks into his eyes and sees only unvarnished, brutal truth. "I understand," she manages to say. "Good," he replies, his impassive mask restored. He assigns her a maid, Clara, and schedules a medical consultation. And with that, for the subsequent 3 weeks, Scarlett existed as a prisoner in a 5-star penitentiary. She was permitted to explore the vast estate, but always shadowed by a heavily armed guard named Matteo, maintaining a distance of 20 paces. She was provided a private chef, a personal pool, and a library of rare editions Gabriel had procured for her. He managed her like a priceless, fragile asset, making inquiries twice a day with sterile questions about the baby's status. There was no warmth, she was merely the vessel for his heir. But Scarlett is an architect. She understands structures and is adept at identifying their weaknesses. She observed the staff, memorized guard rotations, and mentally mapped the compound. And she focused on Clara, the perpetually nervous maid. The maid consistently avoided eye contact with the guards, her brow always damp with perspiration even in the cold. One afternoon, while resting in her suite, Scarlett's fingers brushed against a hard object concealed beneath her pillow. She extracted it, a cheap, disposable burner phone. Her heart began to pound against her ribs. She glanced toward the bathroom where Clara was drawing a bath, the sound of running water providing a cloak of noise. Scarlett powered on the device. A single new message waited. "We know you're his captive. We can extract you. Southgate, 2 a.m. tonight, D.C." The breath caught in Scarlett's chest. D.C. Dominic Corsetti, the rival patriarch. Scarlett remained seated, the cheap plastic of the phone feeling incendiary in her hand. The proposition was staggering. An escape route, a chance to disappear. For a moment, she envisioned herself seizing the opportunity, running into the night. But then she recalled the dead certainty in Gabriel's eyes. He will carve that child out of you. Why would his mortal enemy offer her salvation? He wouldn't. He would neutralize Gabriel by eliminating his heir before it could ever draw breath. This was not an escape plan. This was an invitation to an execution for both her and her unborn son. Scarlett rose to her feet. She bypasses the notion of a packed bag, of a clandestine 2 a.m. escape. Instead, a dam of composure breaks and she floods from her suite, oblivious to a maid's startled cry descending the staircase like a judgment. Matteo materializes from the architecture's shadows, a sudden barrier. "Miss Hayes, you require rest." Her reply is a fracture in the silence. "Take me to Gabriel. Now." Baffled but compliant, Matteo guides her into the West Wing's heart, to Gabriel's study. After a single knock, the door opens, revealing Gabriel and Silas mid-analysis over documents, their heads snapping up at the unsanctioned intrusion. Gabriel's gaze immediately drops to her abdomen, a subconscious audit for harm before meeting her eyes. "What has happened?" he demands, his tone honed to a point. Scarlett advances, slapping a burner phone onto his desk. "Your fortress is a fable," she declares, the words resonating in the sudden vacuum of sound. "Clara provided this. DC claims he can extract me through the south gate tonight." The room's climate plunges into an Arctic chill. Silas mutters an oath, his hand moving to his weapon, but Gabriel quells the motion with a raised palm. His focus remains entirely on Scarlett, not the device. The glacial facade in his eyes splinters, revealing a flash of shock and an unexpected vein of respect. "You possessed an opportunity," Gabriel observes, his voice a low vibration. "You could have made the call. You despise this cage." "I despise being a captive," Scarlett retorts, her hand reflexively shielding her stomach. "But I am no fool, Gabriel. I understand Corsetti's motive is not my salvation, but my child's extinction. And whatever kind of demon you are to the world, you alone are invested in this child's survival." Gabriel rounds the desk, halting mere inches from her, arresting the rhythm of her breath. His hand hovers over the phone, a predator hesitating before it strikes, seizing the device. He annihilates the cheap plastic, its crack echoing in the tense atmosphere. "Silas!" Gabriel commands, his gaze locked with Scarlett's. "Locate Clara. I want a full report of her disclosures before you fracture her fingers. Then seal this estate. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out." "Understood, boss," Silas affirms, before exiting with purpose. Gabriel returns his attention to Scarlett, who shivers as the adrenaline recedes. Wordlessly, a hand on her lower back, a contact of shocking gentleness, guides her toward a sofa. "Sit," he murmurs. "You are trembling. Is it beginning to zell?" she asks, collapsing into the cushions. "Corsetti is a man bereft of patience," Gabriel notes, retrieving a heavy, black Sig Sauer from a concealed vault, inspecting it with expert economy. "If his timeline was 2 a.m., a team is already staged nearby. Your absence will be interpreted as a trigger for a forced entry." As if summoned by his words, a profound, muted concussion shudders the reinforced windows. The chandelier oscillates wildly. A shrill alarm begins its scream, saturating the entire compound. The lighting dies, instantly supplanted by a sinister, crimson emergency glow. "The south gate," Gabriel says through a clenched jaw. What follows is the eruption of raw chaos, the percussive, violent rhythm of gunfire from outside. Scarlett gasps, her hand flying to her mouth as abstract threat becomes tangible reality. The brutal narrative of an action film is unfolding on her doorstep. In an instant, Gabriel is across the study, his grip on her arm pulling her from the sofa. "We are moving to the bunker. Immediately." He propels her into a hallway now transformed into a theater of disciplined mayhem, where armed men sprint past, shouting commands into air thick with the scent of smoke. They reach the main foyer as the colossal front doors absorb a heavy, concussive blow. "Go!" Gabriel shouts, positioning Scarlett behind his own body as he raises his pistol. They race to a concealed entrance behind a vast tapestry. He inputs a code. A heavy steel panel retracts. He thrusts her through the opening just as the mansion's doors splinter and burst inward. Gabriel fires 3 controlled shots into the foyer, felling a masked aggressor before he pivots into the safe room, slamming the steel door. It secures with a profound thud, plunging them into darkness until the bunker's independent lighting activates. The space is a small concrete cell, dense with survival provisions. After the cacophony, the abrupt silence is overwhelming. Scarlet slides down the cool wall, drawing her knees to her chest in a fragile attempt at self-preservation. Gabriel is already at the security console, his eyes devouring feeds of his men engaged in combat on the grounds. He is a tactician observing his war, his expression a mask of brutal concentration. Abruptly, a sharp intake of breath escapes Scarlet as a spasm of pain seizes her midsection. She clutches herself, her eyes wide with terror. "Gabriel!" He spins around, his weapon forgotten, and is kneeling before her in a single motion. "Are you wounded? Is there blood?" "No," she gasps, her eyes squeezed shut. "It isn't. It is the baby." Gabriel's hands hover above her, uncertain, a rare expression of pure dread crossing his features. With immense care, he places his large, warm hand flat against her abdomen. Beneath his palm, through the fabric of her dress, a distinct, powerful kick makes contact, and then another. Gabriel freezes. The symphony of the battle above simply ceases to exist for him. He stares at her stomach, his blue eyes wide, utterly staggered by the small life asserting its presence against his skin. This is the first time he has truly perceived his child, not as an abstract legacy or a bloodline, but as a real, living extension of himself. He raises his head, his gaze meeting Scarlet's tear-filled eyes. In the dim, red luminescence, the distinction between the merciless syndicate head and the terrified mother dissolves, leaving only two people united in their fear of losing the one thing that now holds meaning. For a single suspended moment within that concrete box, the war outside is rendered non-existent. Gabriel Rossi, a man whose empire was built on cold, brutal arithmetic, was completely paralyzed. His hand remained pressed to Scarlet's stomach, his focus absolute on the point where his unborn son had just announced himself. Another faint flutter pushed against his palm. It was a quiet rebellion against the hell that surrounded them. He retracted his hand, staring at it as if it had somehow betrayed him. In that moment, the cryo-forged armor of the Rossi family boss began to fracture, exposing the man beneath. He looked at Scarlet, a trembling figure against the wall, trying to shrink into herself. "Did you feel it?" she managed, her voice a whisper against the hum of the bunker's life support. "I felt it," Gabriel replied, his tone thick with an emotion he could not name. "This is no longer a contract. It is a life. His life." He rose, the pistol at his hip, an afterthought, his entire posture shifting from that of a jailer to a guardian. "You are secure, Scarlet. I am staking my life on that fact. You are secure." Before she could assimilate this, the bunker's immense steel door vibrated from an impact. The secure radio on Gabriel's belt crackled. "Boss!" Silas's voice broke the silence, frayed but steady. "Hostiles neutralized or retreated. We lost 4. Perimeter is secure, but the main residence is compromised." Gabriel's features reset to stone. The moment of vulnerability evaporated, replaced by the pure essence of command. "Acknowledged. Prepare the vehicles. We are relocating." He reached down, offering a hand to Scarlet. She looked at that hand, large, scarred, engineered for violence, and for the first time did not see a monster. She saw her only means of survival. She placed her hand in his, and he drew her to her feet. His grip was remarkably gentle, cautious of her condition. Gabriel keyed the code, and the massive door hissed open, revealing the utter devastation in the main hall. Scarlet gasped, her hand covering her mouth. The elegant walnut paneling was savaged by gunfire. The ancient tapestry that had concealed the bunker was now a smoldering ruin on the floor. Glass from the shattered front windows crunched underfoot like ice, illuminated by the red emergency strobes. The air was a thick mixture of cordite and blood. 2 of Gabriel's men were dragging a body in tactical gear out of the ruined entrance. "Do not look," Gabriel murmured, shifting to obscure her view of a pool of blood spreading near the staircase. He used his physical form as a shield, navigating her through the wreckage. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving a damp, frigid chill. A convoy of 3 armored black Maybachs idled in the driveway, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Mateo stood beside the central vehicle, an M4 carbine slung across his chest. He pulled the reinforced door open as they approached. Gabriel assisted Scarlett into the plush leather interior before joining her. Silas took the front passenger seat. "Where are we being taken?" Scarlett asked, her voice trembling as the convoy accelerated away from the smoking estate. "The Seaport District," Gabriel answered, his eyes perpetually sweeping the dark perimeter. "I maintain a secured penthouse at the Ritz-Carlton. It is a ghost asset, acquired through 3 layers of trusts. The security is of a military standard. The private elevator remains sealed to all but my direct authorization." "And Clara?" Scarlett asked, her thoughts returning to the frightened maid who had initiated the night's events. Silas angled himself from his passenger seat. "She did not survive, Miss Hayes. When the gunfire started, she panicked and attempted to flee through a side exit. She ran directly into the crossfire from Corsetti's own team." Their disregard for their own intelligence asset was absolute. A wave of nausea rolled through Scarlett. A woman was gone. Men were gone. All as a consequence of a procedure in a sterile clinic. The sheer weight of the bloodshed was suffocating her. Gabriel noted her pallor. He retrieved a water bottle from the mini-fridge, opened it, and pressed it into her hand. "Drink," he commanded, his voice low. "She was only a maid," Scarlett whispered, a tear escaping. "She was terrified." "She was a liability," Gabriel corrected, though his tone lacked its customary sharpness. He leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "But she was also an indicator of a far greater problem. Corsetti's operatives had bypassed the estate's defenses with surgical precision. They possessed knowledge of patrol rotations, of the very layout of Gabriel's private sanctum. Claire was merely a piece board, incapable of accessing such privileged intelligence." "What are you implying?" Scarlett's question was a tremor, her hand unsteady as it brought the water to her lips. "The betrayal originates far higher in the hierarchy than a household maid," Gabriel stated, his gaze sharpening within the SUV's shadows. "And this unseen hand has been orchestrating this for a considerable time. An operation this clean requires months of invasive surveillance on my home." A glacial dread seeped into Scarlett's veins as a monstrous possibility began to crystallize in her mind. She studied Gabriel's face, illuminated by the passing lights of the Boston skyline. "Gabriel," she began, her voice a fragile thread. "Just before the clinic, my architecture firm was acquired by a private equity group. They relocated my office to the ground floor, issuing us new security protocols, new phones, new laptops. This all unfolded precisely as I commenced my IVF treatments." Gabriel's posture became utterly rigid. The silence within the armored vehicle grew dense, suffocating. From the front, Silas turned, his expression a dark, knowing mirror of his boss's dawning horror. "What was the name of this equity group?" Gabriel's voice was unnervingly quiet, stripped of all emotion. "Apex Holdings," Scarlett replied, the name a drumbeat against her ribs. Gabriel produced a streamlined, encrypted smartphone. Silas, I want a deep dive on Apex Holdings. Cross-reference their executive board against every known Corsetti shell corporation from the past 5 years. The remainder of the journey was steeped in a tense, unbearable quiet. The city lights became an abstract blur as they descended into the subterranean parking of the Ritz-Carlton. The transfer from the vehicle to a private elevator was a silent, flawless maneuver executed by Gabriel's men. As the lift ascended to the highest floor, Gabriel's eyes finally met hers. The cold, inscrutable mob boss had vanished, replaced by a man just beginning to comprehend the profound depth of the treachery aimed at his bloodline. If Apex is a Corsetti entity, Gabriel murmured, his words timed to the elevator's chime announcing their arrival. Then their discovery of you today was no accident, Scarlett. They have been watching you from the very beginning. The Ritz-Carlton penthouse was the antithesis of the Rossi estate's oppressive gloom. It was an expansive, modern expanse of glass, steel, and white marble, commanding a panoramic 360-degree vista of Boston Harbor. Yet for all its sterile beauty, the reinforced doors and the armed sentinels at each access point served as a stark confirmation that Scarlett had merely been moved from one opulent prison to another. As dawn broke, painting the harbor in hues of violet and gold, Dr. Harrison was already present. The physician, escorted by armed guards, swiftly established a mobile medical station within the vast master suite. Scarlett lay on the bed, her hands clenching the linens as Dr. Harrison guided the cold wand of a fetal Doppler over her abdomen. Gabriel stood like a sentinel at the foot of the bed, his arms folded. He was sleepless, the shadow of stubble on his jaw lending him an even more formidable air. Suddenly, a rapid, rhythmic, whooshing sound filled the space, the pulse of a strong, healthy heartbeat. A gasp escaped Scarlett's lips as her eyelids fell shut in a tidal wave of relief. Tears traced paths from the corners of her eyes into her hairline. He was alive. He was truly unharmed. The fetal heart rate is a stable 145 beats per minute, Dr. Harrison announced with a gentle smile, offering her a tissue. No signs of distress, no indication of premature contractions. The baby weathered the ordeal exceptionally well. You, on the other hand, Miss Hayes, are exhibiting elevated blood pressure. I must insist on strict bed rest for the next 48 hours. Gabriel gave the doctor a curt, decisive nod. Matteo will see you out. The equipment stays. When they were alone again, Gabriel moved to the immense windows, his gaze fixed on the waking city below. The tension emanating from him was a palpable force in the room. Scarlett sat up, drawing her silk robe more tightly around herself. The assault had irrevocably altered the dynamic between them. The previous animosity had been cauterized by the shared, primal need for survival. Did Silas discover anything about Apex Holdings? Scarlett's quiet question broke the silence. Gabriel remained facing the harbor. He confirmed our deepest fears. Apex Holdings is a front company, buried 3 layers deep. The financial trail terminates at a wealth management firm in Zurich, a firm owned and operated by Dominic Corsetti. Scarlett felt the air violently expelled from her lungs. They had owned her entire professional life? They controlled every facet of your existence, Scarlett, Gabriel finally said, turning toward her with eyes like an approaching storm. They managed your building's security. They monitored your work communications, your private calls. The moment you searched for fertility clinics, they were alerted. Ignoring the doctor's explicit orders, Scarlett swung her legs from the bed. Her mind, engineered for blueprints and structural integrity, was now assembling a horrifying new architecture of conspiracy. She rose, walking silently on the heated marble toward Gabriel. "Wait," she whispered, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You told me Dr. Lane sold my genetic material to settle a debt with the Irish mob." "That was the narrative Reese pieced together," Gabriel affirmed, his jaw tight. "The accountant saw the financial records." "But Reese only saw the version of the truth Lane wanted him to see," Scarlett countered, the realization striking her with physical force. She seized Gabriel's arm, her fingers pressing into the fabric of his suit. "Think about it, Gabriel. If Corsetti owned my firm and was monitoring my every action, what is the probability that I would randomly select a clinic holding the Rossi sample where a doctor would just so happen to make such a monumental error?" Gabriel's eyes widened as the chilling, insane logic of her words began to take root. "You're suggesting this was not a mistake?" "I am suggesting I was selected," Scarlett whispered, a cold sweat forming on her neck. "I'm 32, unattached, with no immediate family. I reside alone in a modest townhouse with subpar security. I was the ideal, undefended target." She strode to the glass desk where Silas had left a dossier of the clinic's hacked financial statements. She ripped through files until she located the master ledger, her finger tracing down the columns. "Look," she commanded, beckoning Gabriel over. He leaned in, his chest brushing her back, sending an involuntary tremor through her that she fought to suppress. "These deposits," Scarlett said, indicating a series of large wire transfers to Dr. Lane's offshore accounts. $3 million. They were made 6 months ago, coinciding exactly with my initial consultation. But examine the routing numbers. This money didn't come from the Irish syndicate. The Irish utilized distinct crypto tumblers based in Dublin. Gabriel stared at the alphanumeric sequence, his mind instantly recognizing the financial fingerprint. The Cayman Islands. That prefix belongs to a banking institution used exclusively by the Corsetti family. "Lane didn't steal your legacy to erase a gambling debt," Scarlett said, her voice dropping to a horrified whisper. "Corsetti compensated him to do it. Corsetti had paid Dr. Lane $3 million to access your restricted file, implant it within a completely vulnerable civilian, and then release her into the world." The silence that filled the penthouse was absolute, heavy with the weight of the scheme's diabolical genius. Dominic Corsetti hadn't just wanted the Rossi bloodline extinguished. He had engineered a front row seat for Gabriel. He wanted the child to be born into a state of total exposure, entirely severed from the Rossi syndicate's protection so that Corsetti could then slaughter them both with contemptuous ease, the ultimate declaration of power. Gabriel's hands gripped the glass desk, his knuckles turning a stark white. A low, feral sound rumbled from his chest, the sound of pure, homicidal rage. He had been masterfully played, and Scarlett had been used as a pawn in a war she hadn't known existed. "You were the bait," Gabriel stated, the words like venom on his tongue. He looked at Scarlett, at her pallid face, her terrified expression, the instinctive way her hand shielded her stomach. She hadn't purchased a genetic sample. She had walked directly into a sociopath's meticulously constructed trap. "They wanted me to carry your child, just so they could murder him to destroy you," Scarlett cried, her composure finally disintegrating. She stumbled away from the desk, her breathing reduced to short, ragged gasps. I was nothing more than an incubator for their revenge." In a motion so swift it stunned her, Gabriel bridged the gap between them, pulling her into his arms. It was not a gentle embrace, but a raw, protective instinct. He enveloped her, burying his face in her hair as her sobs broke against his chest. He held her fast, a human anchor against her tide of panic. "You are not an incubator," Gabriel vowed, his voice a fierce growl beside her ear. "You are the mother of my son, and I give you my word, Scarlet. Before this week is over, Dominic Corsetti will drown in his own blood." For the first time since the ordeal began, Scarlet wound her arms around Gabriel, clinging to him. In this violent, terrifying new reality, the merciless crime lord had become her only sanctuary. Abruptly, the sharp trill of a phone sliced through the quiet. It was not one of Gabriel's disposable burners. It was the heavy, encrypted satellite phone Silas had left on the desk, the line reserved exclusively for syndicate-level emergencies. Gabriel eased away from Scarlet, his features hardening into an unreadable mask. He strode to the desk and stared at the illuminated screen. There was no caller ID, only a sequence of zeros. He activated the speakerphone, and the atmosphere in the room became instantly suffocating. "Rossi," Gabriel answered, his tone lethally calm. The distinct click of a lighter, followed by the slow exhalation of cigar smoke, crackled over the line. "Gabriel," a smooth, chilling voice responded. "I see you've relocated the girl to the Ritz. A tasteful selection. Far superior to that drafty old fortress of yours." Scarlet's blood turned to ice. It was him, Dominic Corsetti. "You violated the code, Dominic," Gabriel said evenly, though his free hand was clenched so tightly his nails bit into his palm. "You made this about blood. The Commission will never sanction such an act." Dominic laughed. The threat arrived as a sterile, hollow sound. "The Commission, Gabriel, is an entity of proof, not perception. To the public record, Miss Hayes will be an unfortunate statistic caught in the chaos of a violent break-in. A true tragedy, they'll say, and a particular loss, as she will not reach her third trimester." Gabriel's gaze fixed on Scarlet, a silent, deadly vow in his eyes. "Touch her, Dominic, and your death will be the beginning. I will eradicate your bloodline, salt the earth of your legacy." "A bold declaration from a king in a glass castle," Dominic mocked. "Take in the scenery, Gabriel. The ultimatum hangs in the balance. You have 48 hours to cede the port territories. Failure to comply will result in the architect's head arriving by courier." The connection severed. The declaration left a toxic residue in the air, a promise of absolute ruin. This was no longer a war of shadows. The conflict had breached their walls, leaving no room for retreat. Setting down the phone, Gabriel faced Scarlet with a terrifying clarity. The posture of defense was over. They were now the aggressors. Dominic Corsetti's terms poisoned the room. 48 hours, 2 days until his syndicate descended to dismantle their world. Positioned at the desk, Gabriel was already immersed in the brutal arithmetic of conflict. "Silas," he ordered, his tone devoid of warmth, "I need every soldier armed and deployed. Activate our assets at the docks. We will cripple their logistics. We will raid their strongholds. We will purge them from Boston by nightfall." "Gabriel, hold on." Scarlet's voice sliced through the rising war fever. She stood at the window observing the city's arteries. "A street war is a protracted battle, one you cannot afford. You lack the time." "I don't have time." Her hand rested on her abdomen. "Your objective tonight is to sever the serpent's head." "Dominic is insulated," Gabriel countered, turning toward her. "He commands his network from the Apex Tower's peak. The place is a citadel. Biometric security, fortified steel, and a private army of ex-special forces. A frontal assault is suicide. Not if one understands the structure's inherent weaknesses, Scarlett retorted, a fierce intelligence igniting in her eyes. She moved past him, retrieving a silver laptop from the bag Clara had prepared. Before Apex reassigned me to the lobby, I was the chief preservationist for their portfolio expansions. My company managed the structural retrofit of the Apex Tower. A look of shared astonishment passed between Gabriel and Silas. Gabriel positioned himself behind her as she opened the device, her fingers dancing through security protocols she likely designed. For the commercial valuation, Apex used a major corporation, but they brought us in to analyze the building's core integrity, she narrated, revealing a detailed 3D schematic of a soaring skyscraper. Dominic feels invulnerable in his sky palace. So, the pretender Dominic adorns a 1930s edifice with modern fixtures and reinforced glass, presuming himself secure. Yet he failed to account for Scarlett. She identifies the structural vulnerability. To anchor his penthouse, new support columns were sunk. In doing so, his crew sealed, but did not fill, antiquated, Prohibition-era ventilation shafts. The word capped resonates with Gabriel, his understanding dawning. Scarlett confirms his suspicion. A 3-foot-wide passage extends from the subway line, terminating just beyond the drywall of Dominic's inner sanctum. The contractors, it seems, opted for sheet metal over reinforced concrete, a cost-saving measure that now serves as their undoing. A predatory smile forms on Gabriel's face. This is a direct route into the heart of the enemy's lair. His gaze falls on Scarlett, the woman bearing his heir who just delivered him the means to victory. He is awestruck, murmuring that she is extraordinary. He pivots to his lieutenant. Silas, prepare the equipment. We are moving out. 3 hours later, they navigate squalid sewer tunnels, Gabriel clad in black tactical armor, a submachine gun resting on his chest. Silas and 6 of his most lethal operatives form his entourage. They locate the shaft precisely where Scarlett's blueprints indicated, obstructed by a welded grate. Silas applies a thermal charge, which dissolves the barrier with a soft hiss. The ascent is a punishing 400-foot climb up a vertical, lightless passage. But Gabriel is propelled by a cold rage. He pictures Scarlett confined in her safe room, his unborn child, a bargaining chip. Dominic Corsetti made the conflict existential. The contest concludes this evening. Reaching the shaft's apex, they halt behind the thin metal wall dividing them from the target office. Gabriel detects voices. With a hand signal, his team prepares. Silas affixes a breaching explosive. Gabriel's countdown is silent. 3, 2, 1. The detonation is violently contained, blasting the metal and a section of wall inward in a storm of debris. Gabriel emerges from the smoke, an apparition of vengeance. Dominic's security detail, oriented toward conventional entry points, is utterly unprepared for an attack originating from within their fortress. Gabriel's unit neutralizes them with brutal efficiency. The quiet report of suppressed firearms echoes as targets fall before they can react. Once the brief skirmish ends, a single figure remains opposing them. Dominic Corsetti. He is cornered behind his desk, a gold-plated revolver trembling in his grip, his expression a mask of disbelief at the gaping wound in his wall. How? He manages to ask as a guard's blood stains his tie. It's not possible. Gabriel advances, weapon lowered, his eyes conveying a chilling finality. You purchased the architecture, Dominic, but you never bothered to learn its history. Dominic raises his wavering firearm. I'll kill you, Rossi, you, the architect, and the little mongrel she carries. Gabriel doesn't flinch. With startling speed, he seizes Dominic's wrist, twisting it with an audible crack. The golden pistol clatters to the floor. Before Dominic can cry out, Gabriel drives a knee into his midsection, sending him crumpling to the carpet. Gabriel looms over him, drawing his own Sig Sauer, leveling it at Dominic's head. "This was your error, Dominic," he states. His voice was a deep, menacing vibration. "You perceived my lineage as a vulnerability. You saw her as a simple vessel." Gabriel engaged the hammer, the sound punctuating the gore-splattered silence. "She is the matriarch of the Rossi line, and your existence has already concluded," Gabriel fired. Rain traced patterns on the penthouse windows upon Gabriel's return. Scarlet sat in the darkness, enveloped in a blanket, sleep having eluded her. When the suite door finally opened, her heart surged. Gabriel materialized from the shadows, his tactical suit gone, his shirt marred by soot and crimson stains. He was an image of exhaustion, ferocity, and absolute victory. He offered no words, striding into the bathroom and turning the shower on to its highest pressure. Scarlet shed the blanket and followed. From the doorway, she observed him tear away the ruined fabric, revealing a torso mapped with the scars of a violent existence. He stepped into the scalding spray, bracing against the tile, letting the water wash his foe's life from his skin. She entered, took up a fresh towel, and simply stood by. When he finally cut the flow, the Mafia Don's stoic facade had vanished. He met Scarlet's gaze, his own, filled with profound, bone-deep weariness. "It is done," Gabriel breathed. "Corsetti is eliminated. His lieutenants are ceding the fort territories to Silas. The threat is neutralized, Scarlet. You are secure. The child is secure." A sob escaped Scarlet's lips. She moved forward, wrapping the towel around his shoulders but clinging to him. She pressed her face to his chest, inhaling the scent of the man who had laid siege to a city for her. Gabriel's arms instinctively closed around her, holding her fast, his lips against her hair. "I feared you would not return," she murmured against his skin. "I will always return to you," Gabriel vowed, guiding her face to his. "You are my family now, Scarlet. You and our child. No one will ever threaten you again." 4 months on, the private maternity floor was as fortified as a stronghold. A pair of armed sentinels in tailored suits stood guard, denying all access. Within the sunlit delivery room, Gabriel's brutal reality seemed a world away. Scarlet was drained yet radiant, her face lit with a broad smile. Gabriel occupied a chair directly adjacent to her bed. The formidable head of the Rossi syndicate, the master of a violent enterprise, was weeping without restraint. He was cradling a small, swaddled infant, a son, with a shock of dark hair and, as Gabriel knew, his own light blue eyes. "He is flawless," Gabriel managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. He gently caressed the infant's cheek. "Utterly flawless." "He has your glare," Scarlet jested, placing her hand over his. Gabriel looked at her. In the preceding 4 months, the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. The gilded cage had been replaced by a true, formidable partnership. He had attended every ultrasound, studied the parenting manuals, and gradually allowed her to dismantle his fortifications. She was no longer a captive. She was his consort. "What shall we call him?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her brow. Scarlet regarded the man who had acquired her, waged a war for her, and for whom she had developed an unexpected devotion. "Leo," she said gently. "Leo Rossi. It translates to lion." A broad, authentic smile spread across Gabriel's face. Leo, the successor. He looked back at his son. "You will command the world, little lion, but not yet. For now, you just rest." Scarlet settled back as Gabriel transferred Leo into her arms. 9 months prior, she had entered that clinic seeking only a quiet existence and a child. She acquired a mafia king, a criminal organization, and a heritage steeped in violence. Yet as Gabriel encircled them both, a bulwark against the outside world, she understood she would never exchange her chaotic, perilous family for anything. Scarlet Hayes sought a simple life at the Lane Institute. With a ledger and a hope, she attempted to purchase a baby. She instead inadvertently purchased an entire criminal dynasty, thereby igniting a vicious underworld conflict. From a crucible of treachery and chaos, a profound and improbable allegiance was forged. Gabriel Rossi, a man defined by his own brutality, becomes captivated by the very woman sent to orchestrate his downfall, a perfect narrative paradox. Their bond was not born of romance, but was a covenant sealed through the grim reality of mutual survival. The gilded cage that once confined Scarlet was shattered, replaced by a fortress built upon a fierce and unwavering loyalty. In this, she discovered the family she had always sought, one far more violently protective and exquisitely unhinged than she could have ever conceived.
The rain arrives before the truth does. She stands under a weak streetlight, one hand over the small curve of her stomach, the other gripping an umbrella that cannot protect her from what is coming. Across from her, a black car waits like fate made visible. Then he steps out of it, not as a donor, not as a signature on a file, but as consequence. He does not introduce himself as a man. He arrives like a verdict. In another life, Scarlet might have walked home with ice cream, laughed softly in her kitchen, and waited for her child to enter a gentle world. Instead, she is taken into a fortress by a man whose touch can be both a threat and a shelter. That contradiction is where the tragedy breathes. Gabriel is born from violence, shaped by command, trained to protect by controlling. Scarlet is born from hope, shaped by longing, trained to nurture by trusting. When those two lives collide, neither gets to remain what they were. The lesson lives in that collision. People often think love begins in tenderness. Sometimes it does, but sometimes, especially in broken worlds, love begins in recognition. It begins when one wounded person sees another clearly enough to stop performing strength. Gabriel does not become human because he wins a war. He becomes human because fear enters him. Not fear for his empire, but fear for her and the child. Scarlet does not become strong because she stops trembling. She becomes strong because she trembles and still chooses truth, still chooses to think, still chooses to act. There is something profoundly sad in that. Their bond is not born in innocence. It is forged in siege alarms, bunker walls, blood on marble, and the unbearable knowledge that safety can vanish in a second. Yet that is precisely why it feels earned. Love in this kind of tragedy is not a soft rescue. It is a decision to become accountable for another life after fate has stripped away every illusion. The world they inhabit remains cruel. The dead do not rise because a child is born. The past does not forgive because two people finally understand each other. But still, the story offers a fragile light. Ruin does not cancel tenderness. It tests whether tenderness is real. And that may be the most cinematic lesson of all. Life does not wait for perfect conditions before asking people to love bravely. Sometimes it asks in the middle of smoke, in the aftermath of terror, in the hour when both people are too tired to pretend. And when they answer anyway, that is not weakness. That is grace surviving where it had every reason not to.